Hello everyone, my name is Jalen Jones, digital producer here at WRAL. If you're watching this video, make sure you like and subscribe for more content you guys can't get anywhere else. It's totally free, doesn't sign you up for anything, but what it does is make sure that the latest from WRAL is in your feeds, and we want that to happen. Today's conversation is with two wonderful guys from our NC Capitol team, Will Doran and Paul Specht. They break down what is the recount process for North Carolina elections. This is obviously inspired by the results of the Page Berger race up there in Rockingham County. We recorded this on March 16th. This was recorded around noon. So this information may or may not be dated depending on when you're listening to this video podcast. Let's get you to that content.
It is noon on Monday, which means we are 24 hours away from knowing if one of the most powerful North Carolina legislators will request a recount in his primary where he trails by 23 votes. By now, you've probably heard about Phil Berger, the state Senate leader since the year 2011, on the ropes against Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page. And this is a huge deal because if Berger loses, it would upend the power dynamics in the state capitol. And tomorrow, he has until tomorrow noon, Tuesday, to let election workers know if he wants to request a recount. Now, Will, what will that look like if and when he does? We expect him to. He just hasn't made that announcement yet.
That's right, Paul. And, like you said, this race has just been sending reverberations through the entire state political world because, there were 26,000 people who cast a ballot in this race, and they're separated by 23 votes out of 26,000. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, the state is pretty good at counting votes. When you put your ballot into that machine, it has a very small error rate. So a lot of people look at that and say 23 votes might actually be a pretty insurmountable lead, even though it seems like such a small number. We really don't have a history in North Carolina of a recount, especially in a race of this size, being able to overturn that many votes.
And we should point out that they've already done a small counting of ballots already, counting all those ballots that were in the race. On Friday, they had what's called a canvass meeting where they went over a sampling of the ballots in those counties, Guilford and Rockingham, which cover this Senate District 26, which Berger has held since, I think 2001?
Yeah, it's close to 30 years, yeah.
Close to 30 years. And when they did that, they already found some ballots that were ineligible in parts of the county. None of those, it turned out, affected this race. The ineligible ballots affected the Democratic primaries there. So if there are going to be fluctuations in this lead, they would probably have to come through a recount or legal challenges.
That's exactly right. And so the State Board of Elections has helpfully put out what you can see here, the recount process in North Carolina explained. You can find that on the State Board of Elections website, or you can also find our reporting at WRAL.com, which breaks down a lot of these details. But it goes through it. There are multiple different types of recounts. So, this is something that could last for days and days here, because first you do your machine recount, and that just kind of runs some ballots back through the machines, does a quick spot check, make sure that the machines were counting right. Then you can do what's called a partial hand recount, which is they just take a random sample, I think it's 3% of the ballots, and you just look at them. And sometimes, you're supposed to fill out the little circle. Well, sometimes people just draw an X or draw a check mark through the circle, and it's clear that they meant to vote for somebody, but it doesn't get picked up by the machine because they filled it in wrong.
Right.
So they can, that's what that hand recount is. They can look at that and say, okay, this person did mean to vote in this race, it just, because they did it wrong or, for whatever reason, it didn't get picked up by the machine. And so that's really where we'll probably see some movement if we get to that stage. But I should note, there's not a whole lot of movement that we've seen in the past. Just in 2024, we had a state Supreme Court race. This was a statewide race, millions of people cast a ballot in it, and it got down to a recount and separated by like 700 and something odd votes. And that recount only found, I think it was about 14 net change.
And was that because of problems with the bubbles or stuff like that?
Exactly. So after they did the recount, they found, it was the Allison Riggs Jefferson Griffin race, and Jefferson Griffin gained 56 votes in the recount, and Riggs gained 70 votes in the recount. So about 120 out of millions. I mean, we're talking very small numbers here.
Right.
And so, if you then shrink that down to just a state Senate seat, not statewide, not millions of people voting in this, only 26,000 people voting in this, you can, kind of do that math in your head. It's probably not going to be 23 votes to be found total, let alone that Berger could make up. So, we could do this recount process, and I think a lot of people expect that Berger will request the recount just because that's, you want to exhaust all your options. But I think what we're all hearing, is that this is probably going to go to court and the lawyers are going to get involved.
Does that happen every time? It seems people expect that just because Berger's such a powerful guy. A lot of people are interested in keeping him in place. What kinds of things could they sue for? I know they say you can sue for anything if you have enough money. But in this case, like you said, we don't expect to see much change if we're just looking at the number of people that filled out their ballots wrong. And the county elections officials last week, they already pulled out the voters that they deemed ineligible. It was only 4, and they were in the Democratic primary. Everybody else looked like they were eligible. What else could they sue for?
Well, that's why he's spending thousands and thousands of dollars, maybe more, on high-priced lawyers. They're going to find every single possible thing that they could challenge. And, it could be that they try to throw out some ballots that were already counted. It could be that they try to get some ballots counted that weren't counted originally. Or it could be that they try to just go for an entirely new election, have a do-over. We've actually seen that before in North Carolina. Obviously nothing of the the high profile nature of this, but for, smaller races, city council races, mayors, things like that, we have seen the state step in the past and order a do-over election. Obviously, the most famous was the 2018, the 9th District congressional race that was marred by those absentee ballot fraud allegations.
And in that case, what remind me, it was the 9th District is out towards Charlotte, and it looked like that it was a Democrat who was leading, and then it was a pretty close race between Dan McCready and Mark Harris, who is now in Congress.
Correct.
But Mark Harris had a campaign operative who was putting in absentee ballots the wrong way, breaking rules when it came to absentee ballots.
Correct, yeah, he had a whole team that was filling out people's ballots for them, which you're not allowed to do.
Right.
And some of those people have since been indicted and convicted of that, and they did eventually order an entirely new election. So that's not unheard of in North Carolina, and it can be for any sort of issue. It could be for fraud reasons, for just administrative errors in the election that you can point out. If you can point to, we think a lot of ineligible voters were actually wrongfully allowed to vote, then if there's enough of them involved, that could lead to officials taking a vote. And so this eventually could come down to a vote by the Board of Elections on how to handle all of this.
It's so weird in cases like this to not know when this will end. Usually we're used to coming to you with information and saying, all right, here's the deadline, here's when it's going to happen. We know that he has until Tuesday to request a recount. We don't know how long that'll last because of lawyers, and so this could go on for days, maybe weeks. We'll see, just depending. A lot will happen in the next 24 hours, and when it does, we'll have the latest information for you on WRAL.com. Check the NC Capital section, or make sure your phone gets alerts from our app.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Paul. Again, our NC Capital team does a really good job covering our state. You guys can find all the reporting in the NC Capital section on WRAL.com. Again, if you're watching this video, make sure you like and subscribe. Totally free, doesn't sign you up for anything. Make sure that the latest from WRAL is in your feeds. We do these videos daily, and thank you guys so much for watching.